Just for context, I am a 23-year-old male who lives in the Midwest surrounded by woods and open farmland. I often have sleep paralysis, and I don't have creepy or off-putting experiences. Sometimes I will hear something or see something that I think could be just my brain still half asleep. Not too scary for anyone who hasn't had sleep paralysis before. It's mostly just being awake and not being able to move, and yes, that sounds scary, but to a person that it happens to, almost on a weekly basis, you get kind of used to it most of the time. I just realize I'm in that state of being awake and not being able to move. So, I usually just casually try to move my leg and arm muscles to eventually wake up and reposition myself so I can try to go back to sleep. Usually changing positions helps. There were 2 occasions that I would like to share that genuinely terrified me. The first incident was the very first time I had sleep paralysis. I was about 8 years old, and I was living with my grandparents at the time in the middle of a 26-acre plot on the countryside. I had a television set that was from the 80s or 90s. Basically one of those types of TVs that gave you that weird static feeling if you got too close. Anyway, I was sleeping one night, and I heard the sound of metal scraping, and I woke up. The TV had a white static that was illuminating my room. In the room there was a closet that had a broken sliding door that would only open with extreme force. Enough force that I as an 8-year-old child couldn't even open. Well, the scraping metal sound was the door sliding open, and I knew it was that sound because I had heard it all the time when my grandparents needed to get into that closet. When I realized what it was, I thought it was one of my grandparents, though I thought it was strange that they were trying to get into the closet since it was around 2 or 3 a.m. at the time, and there isn't really anything they should need in there at that time of night. It was mostly just old clothes and random knickknacks they have collected over the years. When I went to turn my head to see what it was, I couldn't move my head, so I tried to pull my blanket off my body to try and stand up, and I couldn't. The only feeling I had was what I could best describe as that feeling when your arm or leg falls asleep and you get that pins and needles feeling. Yeah, that, but across my entire body. I was genuinely terrified of why I couldn't move and why I heard the closet opening. Eventually, I turned my eyes enough to see out of my peripheral vision. A figure standing halfway out of the closet staring at me, not moving, just standing staring. It was watching me struggle to move, and I couldn't do anything but stare back. I will never forget the long, gangly look of the figure. If I had to compare it to something, I would say it reminds me of the Rake, but obviously this was a time before internet scary stories and creepypastas. So, I didn't know what that was at the time. All I know is I was in a complete state of shock and horror. I tried to let out a scream to alert my grandparents, but I couldn't even muster up a squeak. Eventually, with enough brute force and a will to live, I managed to regain all my senses and shot up out of my bed and ran to turn on the light. The figure was gone, but the closet was still open. I remember running to my grandparents' room and screaming that there was a man in my closet, and my grandpa, who was a hunter, had many weapons in the house and grabbed one. He threatened anyone who was in the house that they better show themselves. No one was there. I told them about the closet, but they just told me it must have been open already. I know it wasn't open because that closet already scared me, and I made sure it was closed before I went to bed. I never slept in that room again. I had my brother switch me rooms. I made up an excuse that I didn't like the color of the room, and he just went along with it, but I think he knew I was scared, and he was older, so he took the room just to be a good brother. I never told him of the experience I had with the figure because I didn't even know if it was real or not. The second experience was more recent and the only other time that I've had a truly terrifying experience with sleep paralysis. I am now married, and I told my wife about my sleep paralysis, but I told her not to worry too much because I am more used to it happening and I usually just keep my eyes shut to avoid seeing anything creepy, and like I said before, it's easily manageable and I usually don't see anything anyway. I just want to be sure. Anyway, this experience happened a few days before writing this. It was during the middle of the day, and I was taking a nap in my bed. Usually when I have sleep paralysis, I can get myself out of it within a few seconds and go back to sleep like nothing really happens. Not this time. This time, I woke up and knew I was paralyzed. So, I tried to move my arms and legs around to get my body awake, but for some reason I could not get myself out of it. Like I said, I keep my eyes closed to avoid seeing anything, but this time, after about 2 or 3 minutes of trying to wake myself up, I started to get frustrated. So, I decided to open my eyes. To my left is a large window. I live in an apartment complex on the ground level, so the window leads straight to the ground at eye level. Well, outside in broad daylight, I saw what looked to be the same figure I saw as a child. I can't be too sure though. All I know is that this thing was tall and black, and it was walking toward my window. Outside the apartment complex is a line of trees about 40 feet back, and it was at the tree line. As it slowly got closer, I noticed some features on the figure. Its eyes were beet red, and it was smiling wide. Its teeth were poking out of its mouth, and they were razor sharp. I couldn't do anything but watch in terror as this tall, horrifying figure walked toward me. It put me in a state of horror, and I honestly almost started to cry, thinking my life was about to end. Finally, after about 30 seconds of me staring at this figure getting closer to me, I finally managed to wake myself up, and just as soon as it appeared, it was gone. I will never forget the way it was staring at me menacingly. Almost like it was enjoying watching me suffer.
Models popping bottles.